everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's the Edubots webinar, and we have a lovely Sylvie Studente from Regent's University in London. Without further ado, I can give you the word and let you start with a brief personal introduction here.
Hi everyone, my name is Sylvie Studente, and I'm an assistant professor at Regent's University in London. My background is in human-computer interaction, specifically in the area of learning technology. And I'm going to be talking to you today about two studies that we implemented using the differ chatbot prior to and during the lockdown. I just need to share my slides with you. Lars, is it the present now button at the bottom of the screen? Is that right?
Okay.
But when I click on that, okay, so if I click on your entire screen, it just shows this chat window. It's not allowing me to share my presentation.
You just need to open up your presentation and have that on the screen.
That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Okay. I think so.
Okay, yeah, I have my presentation on the screen.
And then you click the actual screen inside the prompt, and then click share. I'm getting that up there for you.
It's still not letting me. Okay, great. Oh,
perfect.
Right, so now can you see my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. So as I was saying, I do have a PhD in HCI, but I'm also a teacher, so a few technical issues come with the territory, I think. Okay, right. So as I said, I work at Regent's University London. I've worked at this university for around 10, 11 years. I've worked at a number of institutions over the years. As well as teaching, as I say, I've been active in research for over 20 years now in the area of HCI and educational technology. So I'm going to be talking to you about how I've been using the differ chatbot to support my students in higher education. And I'm going to give you an overview of two studies that I conducted using that. Obviously, if you want to contact me following today, I've included my email address here, which is sylvie.studente@regents.ac.uk. Okay, so an overview of what I'm going to present to you today. I'm going to have a general introduction. And then there are two studies that I've run using the differ chatbot. So study one was our pilot study, which we ran prior to the pandemic. So I'm going to be talking a bit about the background motivation there, the design of the study, and what we found. Study two was run during the pandemic. So at this point, the university was physically closed. Classes were delivered online. And our student base is mainly international. So a lot of our students returned to their home countries and continued their studies purely online. So we use the chatbot there to try and help engage students with their weekly learning tasks. So I'm just going to talk a bit about what drove this project work. So I read that feelings of isolation were reported to be a key cause of low engagement, particularly for international students. And as I say, my focus is on international students at this point, because our student base is around 98% international at the university that I teach at. Also, we have the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. So feelings of social isolation also bring feelings of deep disconnectedness in some instances. And these feelings can be exacerbated by the lockdown as a consequence, as we know, of the pandemic. So really what drove this research and what I'm advocating here is that chatbot technology can be used to provide students with connectedness and a sense of belonging both of which are essential for effective learning. So as I say, I'm going to report on 2 studies. One conducted pre-lockdown. So here we used the chatbot with program directors and students. The focus was on communication and assisting our students with the transition from school to university. The second study was conducted during lockdown, and here we looked at the more granular module level, so not at the program level, but the module level, and we used the chatbot with module leaders and students. The emphasis was upon supporting their weekly learning and assessments. Okay, so 2 slightly different focuses there. And also what I was quite interested in is in the general area of chatbot technology, particularly looking at the more traditional uses, the focus has always been on the relationship between the user and the chatbot. Okay, so human and AI. But I think that chatbot technology gives us such a great opportunity to use the AI to connect people. So let's take a look at study 1. So this was conducted prior to lockdown. As I said, the focus was on assisting the transition from school to university and facilitating communication. So we won't go into too much detail here, but here is some of the background motivation. So we know that for many students, the transition from school to university can be quite overwhelming. Research also shows us that when students feel isolated in this transition, dropout rates can increase. And I've been talking about international students, and for this group of students, feelings of social isolation can be quite a challenge. And social isolation is defined as research as being those feelings of loneliness and marginalisation. We also know that learning or success of learning is in part determined by developing connections with peers and educators as part of a learning community. Obviously, we all know what a chatbot is here. Okay, now a really good feature is obviously the use of pattern matching to link students to mentors or to each other. So quite a lot in the background motivation there in research. So the first study we conducted in the autumn term of 2019, we created 4 learning communities. As I said, the focus was on easing the transition for students in their first year of study to help increase communication. So we provided students on some of our programs and the program directors with access to differ via the mobile app. And when they had their study induction week, we gave an overview of how they would use it, and they used it throughout the whole of the autumn term. So what was set up here was an announcements page where program directors could post study-related announcements, peer profiles, where students could see a list of peers and also pictures. They could private message each other, and the open chat, which was used for program-related discussions. So this was used throughout the autumn term, and at the end of term, we collected information via questionnaires, and we also ran focus groups with students and program directors. Specifically, what we wanted to look at here was to identify benefits and challenges. Okay, so here's some of the information we collected. Now, there was a lot, so it's a summary here, but I'm happy to provide further detail if anyone wants to request that via email. Here's some feedback from our students, and it's all quite positive. So overall, students felt it was more personalised using the chatbot to connect to their programme director. They felt it helped them to connect to their classmates more closely and easily. Students also felt that they had quicker responses through using the chatbot than through email. They felt that the support they received helped them in understanding assessments better. Okay, so these are actual comments from students that we interviewed. So we can see very positive. We also found a positive correlation when we analysed the data between study engagement and engagement with peers. So we can see that the social aspect there, engagement with others, is of high importance. We also asked students and the programme directors to make recommendations as to how the bot could be more beneficial to them. So here's just some of the comments. We won't go through in massive detail because I'm aware of time. But they felt the app could be used to promote student and teacher interaction more. That it could be used as a networking app, but also that there could be additional features. So at this point, we were just using it to facilitate conversations between staff and students and students and students. But students said it would be useful to have a Q&A feature so that they could find out information about their assessments on the fly, etc. Students also commented it would be useful to see the benefit of using the chatbot in their modules more purposefully, and that it could be aligned with coursework requirements, assignments, and group work. So we took these aspects and we ran another study during lockdown. Okay, and we relaunched it at a more granular level. So rather than focusing at the program level, we looked at the module level because we really wanted to address how the chatbot could be used to support learning and group assessments during the lockdown. Okay, so let's look at some of the motivation here. Again, I've been talking about how students can feel socially isolated and these feelings of disconnect. Now, we know that the global lockdown and the closure of universities has really ramped up these feelings. And that obviously the shift to remote learning resulted in a loss of personal contact for students with their peers and tutors. It also impacted the university experience, particularly for first years, and impeded social interactions which would ordinarily take place in classes. We also know that there are numerous benefits of using chatbots in education that have been reported. Okay, we don't need to go over them, but you can see them all there. And it's not just about the socialisation aspect, but also decreasing demands on lecturers in providing assessment information. Quite often I'll get emails in the early hours of the morning, Sylvie, can you remind me when my assessment's due? So it was really handy to be able to put this information into the chatbot. So during the autumn term of 2020, so last year during the lockdown, we developed 4 learning communities, and the focus was on supporting learning, facilitating engagement. So again, we provide students and this time the module leaders with access to the chatbot, and we made some additional features. Okay, so the introduction to other students, being able to ask questions to the learning community, and then a Q&A feature. So this Q&A feature was introduced for each module. So we can see that there are questions, that frequently asked questions that students might want to know, such as when are the submission dates for assessments? Is there any group work for the module and how will it be organised? Okay, so we can see here for the first one, when are submission dates for the assessments? Students click on that and they've got all the information. Okay, so this was for one of my modules. So we can see that there are 2 assessments, a continuous assessment, it tells them when they're due and where they need to refer to for more information. We also set up assessment areas for students who were doing group work, so group work assessments. Okay, so again, this is one of my modules. So I organised students into 4 groups for their first assessment, and they would use this, okay, to help them. So we can see group work discussions took place. So each week, as we had our webinar classes, they would have a task they had to complete using Differ. So we can see here that the group members are discussing who's working on which part of their assessment. They were also asked to do a comparison on 2 companies. So here, this is just part of their discussion. And as you can see, I'm just monitoring the discussions there. So they used it for group work, assessment group work. We also had an open chat area, which we would use for weekly discussions on webinar topics. So one week I was teaching students on accounting. I know I said my background's HCI. I'm quite flexible. I tend to step in where needed. This was a week I was teaching some of our foundation business students about accounting, and we'd reviewed some theory and some case studies, and then we would have weekly discussions on the topics in the open chat area on Differ. Okay, so also for our larger modules, we had different webinar groups within larger modules. And we also used Differ to set up tasks within weekly webinars, as you can see here. Okay, so this is from a different module. This wasn't one of mine, but across the 4 modules that we use Differ in, specifically this time around, we focused on using Differ to support learning topics, to support collaborative learning, and to support group work assessments. Our worry was that because our students are international and would have all gone home, trying to do group work might be somewhat challenging. But Differ allowed us still to bring students together, to create that sense of community, to work together to meet, obviously, their learning tasks. Okay, and then obviously, something that was very good is that students could connect to module leaders and peers, so we were able to see a picture of everyone, names, okay, and could set up group chats, so that was very good as well, particularly as we weren't all face-to-face in the classroom. Students generally seem to be a bit shy during webinar sessions and many have their cameras turned off, so no one really knew what anyone looked like. So this was really good. We could put a face to names and we could have conversations with each other. So that's some of the things that we use a chatbot for during lockdown. And again, let's take a look at the impacts of that and the wider project made up of these 2 studies. Obviously, we have lots of statistical data, but I'm just trying to keep it brief because of time. I'm happy to send you our full report should you want to take a look. So what we found was increased engagement in modules. That students found a lot of benefit and support from using Differ during lockdown. We were able to integrate the chatbot to support weekly learning and assessment activities. We saw enhanced collaboration between students. It also helped to relieve student anxieties, particularly the Q&A feature, because obviously they could go to the FAQ section 24/7, anytime. They didn't have to wait for a response. So it helped to relieve anxieties there. It also impacted the practice of others because other module leaders and programme directors at the university were also using the chatbot. So we've been currently using this on modules, looking to use it again this term, along with Lars. Again, looking to keep it integrated into weekly teaching. That seemed to be very beneficial to students, and continuing to use it for group work collaborations, particularly when students are undertaking assessments remotely. Now, since we've been running this project, we've had a lot of publications on the further detail of our findings, and this is basically what we've done since we've been working with Differ and Lars over the last 2 years. So quite a lot there. It's a really, really fascinating area. I think it's very, very beneficial area. We can make a lot of difference here to students, and it's a research area which is gaining a lot of traction. I've also just had an edited book which is now out, which was looking at the impact of COVID-19 on teaching and learning in HE. We specifically have a section in the book on technology. And there's a chapter on chatbots in there and some of the work that we've been doing. So yeah, a very useful area of study and invaluable to our students. And here's the references that I used to put together the material for today. I read a lot. And that's my email address. You know, if anyone is interested in contacting me, I'm always open to future collaborations as well. Given my research area, I'm really passionate about AI, HCI, and learning. Yeah, and that's what I've got to share with you guys today.
Thank you for a very thorough presentation here, and a thorough work that you have been done now, researching the use of chat and chatbots, both in the transition phase, but also more integrated in the teaching and learning practice. So I'm really fascinated and impressed by the work you and your team has done there. Let's see if there's any questions among the participants here before I jump in. I got a couple of questions myself. There's a hand up here. I think it's Diana going first. I see Nora turning on our camera as well, so perhaps she got a question too. But Diana, would you like to?
Okay, Sylvie, thank you for a great presentation. Well, it was interesting to see that actually at the project Edubots, we are doing very similar thing. After our pilot one, when we have compiled our research papers, we actually find out your research papers and cited in our research papers that considers that impact at student engagement in the differ, and also teachers' engagement. And we also have found positive collaboration among engagement of students and using differ. And also students expressed their satisfaction with the connection with the teachers with differ. Perhaps Antonella, who has joined later, could tell you more about that. But what I wanted to say that we found the paper very interesting, and perhaps some future collaboration could happen between us. Besides, yes.
Yeah, so just drop me an email. Let's do it.
No problem.
I'm working on a book chapter at the moment. It might be interesting to pull together some of our work and some of the commonalities in our findings as well. So please,
right.
I'd be very interested in that.
Thank you. Well, we have also explored the usability and user experience of differ, and also find some interesting insights. First results are not very satisfying. It needs to be some aspects of improvements. And what I wanted to ask is how much actually did you use chatbot within differ, and how much of the engagement of the teacher was how much teacher was involved in discussions? For example, if you compare it in percent.
Well, initially, as I say, we use it at the program level, and we found that quite challenging. So we use it at the module level. I found that in our experience, it needs to be, and I don't know if this is just our student group, but it needs to be really teacher driven to start to encourage that initial interaction. And I think this is why as well it works well for group work, because if students see other students using it, then, but I found that the initial opinion of students was, well, we use WhatsApp, well, we use Facebook. Which is why then I started to focus on the more granular module level. Students and educators both need to understand what are the benefits of using a chatbot above and beyond current messaging applications. Yeah, because we already use things like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp for sending messages to people that we know. So what are the, I would say, educational benefits? What can this offer in terms of the educational experience to both students and educators? And I think that's the focus that will really determine how successful research in chatbots is moving forward. That's my own personal opinion. We have to make the link to education clear. It's more than just conversation, because there are too many other conversational platforms to compete with.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Sylvie.
Thank you.
Nora?
Yes.
Hello. Go next here.
Yes. Well, I'm going to introduce myself first. I'm Dr. Norhan. I'm working at Leeds University, and we have just had a pilot as well at the Lifelong Learning Center at Leeds, and they used Differ, the same as you did in your pilot one. So it was student-led communities, and it was really successful as well. There are indications that it did boost students' sense of belonging, especially among the PhDs, the ones that they just joined university and they didn't know anybody and they just needed this sense of peer support and stuff. So it was quite beneficial for this group. I have two questions for you. I've read all your research work and I've cited it as well, including the chapter that you written. I found them very interesting.
It's so nice to know that the work that I've been publishing is useful to people.
Very useful indeed. So the first question is, do you have another institutional platform that you use with the students? So for instance, here at Leeds, students have to use Microsoft Teams, and they have their own, of course, WhatsApp groups, but still they have to use Teams for communicating with their instructors and stuff. So this is one, because our paper, I've written a paper as well on this trial or this pilot, and one of the main findings were that there has to be an institutional support to the chatbot or the messaging platform that is adopted by an institution.
And I think that's a challenge in itself.
Exactly.
That's a big challenge.
Yeah. So because some of the students commented on that, and they said that if it was, institutionally used, it was used by all students at the University of Leeds, they probably would have used it much longer.
Yes,
because they had so many other things to use.
We had similar findings, and again, I think this comes back to we really need to sell or advocate the educational side of using the chatbot. What is a benefit to education in terms of benefits to students and to staff? Otherwise, I don't know. As I say, as a conversational platform, there are so many conversational platforms that are used. We use the Blackboard VLE, we use Teams. Yeah. Students have other ways of communicating that are, I guess, university driven. So the challenge is trying to bring in any new technology. What we need to really get across and what we need to put the research effort into is not just a communication, because that's already being done across many platforms. What makes a chatbot more beneficial when compared to other platforms? What is the added value? What is the added value to education? What is the value to students? What is the value to staff effort?
So in your experiments, did the tutors use any other platform other than Differ?
Yeah, we have to, yeah.
Yeah, right. So they did have other platforms that students use as well, right?
Yeah, which is why we really worked on linking our weekly webinar materials and assessments through Differ. As I say, students need to understand what is the benefit of using this. And sometimes we don't realize the benefit of something until we use it, until we experience it. Yeah, we can tell someone, well, this is great because it does X, Y, and Z, but until the person experiences that for themselves. So I think the route in is the benefit to education, the benefit to teaching, the benefit to supporting webinars, assessments, group work.
I may add a comment here. Yeah. I find a physical anecdote valuable here, and it's something finding the purpose and perceived usefulness of different apps and platforms, and that's basically what is the primary position of different platforms. There's a bunch of tools that are the classroom, and most of the existing learning management system, or it's called the virtual learning environments, is that formal classroom. and there's both VLE, and then there's perhaps Microsoft Teams having that position, being part of the formal learning environment. And then I find that there's room for a separate space, which might be the virtual corridor, where students can have more informal conversations with each other, and where they might bump into each other and getting to know new people. And that's kind of throughout the whole student journey. But then there's also that special time, the transition phase for students, when they're coming, many straight up from school, but then there's also all the mature students coming back to university after being working for a number of years, perhaps. So, but all of them have that. It's a transition phase, and during that transition phase, they have special needs and many social needs. So that's a third kind of physical anecdote that I'm starting to use, and that's kind of the student pub.
But I think there's also competing platforms within that WhatsApp that I think is
so I think what we see of the first generation of apps being used for the informal purposes is random WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. That is not possible for institutions to adopt for an entire student population. So I think that's kind of the three different areas where we find room for communication platforms and chatbots to play a role. One research area that I would love to see is to what extent these three things can be combined. Is it possible to use one communication platform for three different purposes?
I think that sounds very ambitious. You'd have to replace, it would replace everything. I mean, our VLE is for all of our assessment information, our lesson plans for each week, our assignment submission, and then I don't know, just trying to imagine all the different tasks and actions and you know, with Microsoft Teams meetings. How would you? I think that's very ambitious.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think the focus is really the educational benefit, and not just that, but you know, our students are always on their mobile phones, and we can make use of that technology, but we are competing with so many of the conversational platforms. Therefore, the focus should not necessarily be on the conversation. That's only part of it. That's only part of what this can offer. Yeah. I think the big sell here is tying it into how it supports, or how it can be used to support weekly learning. I mean, perhaps that's even something to run training sessions on for educators. How might they use it to support group assessments? How might they use it to set up activities on weekly webinar sessions? Yeah, if people don't know about these things, how can they implement them? I think, you know, there's a lot of needing to share what we're doing with the wider community, and publishing and research is only one part of that. It's actually taking it to people on the shop floor.
Can I ask another burning question, please?
Sure.
You mentioned about using Q&A, the Q&A feature in Differ, to ease some of the students' anxieties. Can you give us an example of that? Can you elaborate a little bit more about that, please? It sounds interesting, actually.
Yes, sure. So for each module that used Differ during lockdown, so we looked at modules that had maybe slightly lower pass rates, low engagement levels. So we looked at frequently asked questions that students would want to know, such as, what time is my webinar class? Are there group assessments, and how will they be managed? When are my assignments due? Where can I find assessment information? And we would put these questions in to Differ, and when students clicked on the questions, there was like a pre-given answer that we had entered. But it was great because it means rather than my emails on my phone pinging at 2 a.m. in the morning, from students. And, you know, when's my assessment due? When's our next webinar class? They could go onto their phone, go to the frequently asked questions on the bot and ask it. And then my phone didn't ping. It was great. I got to sleep. But I mean, we have quite an administrative burden, I think, as educators, don't we? A lot of our time is also taken up answering the same questions or queries many times. We can put that into a single resource. This is what I was talking about in terms of advocating the benefits for education, not just to students, but also to educators. And this might be a scope of a really good future paper, focusing on what those future benefits would be. In terms of education, not just conversation, but in education, what are the benefits for students, for educators? If you ladies would like to work on a group paper on this, I would be happy to do that. How great would that be? Putting together all our research. What patterns might we find?
That would be quite interesting, actually. Yeah. Why not?
So I think there's a lot of great opportunities here, and there will be several publications coming out of the Edubots project as well, contributing to the kind of the research area, chatbots in education. And I think I think you mentioned, Sylvie, before that the number of papers now being published around chatbots and conversational agents has really been increasing a lot in the last couple of years. So it seems to be a rising interest and perhaps a rising maturity of the technology and insights in how to implement it, and not just.
Well, that's it. I mean, initially, I remember very early chatbots or conversational agents, as they were called, were things like IKEA's Anna, online shopping type assistants. But the usage has really moved on. And I find in interest in technology and AI, there tends to be this that happens over the years. And I think with trying to increase quality standards in education and the importance of the learning experience as well, this is what's pushing the interest in the area. So I think it's definitely on the up. And a lot of similar papers are being written in the area. I guess this is a point I was trying to make about what are the benefits in terms of, I don't know how else to put it, education, pedagogy, for students, staff. What are the benefits on the factory floor? Because we have so much to compete with, as we've spoken about, and as Lars has mentioned, these different levels or areas. And then, as you've spoken about here, about the different VLEs that we're using in universities, there are lots of challenges. We've got to break through those challenges and say, okay, well, wait a minute, this solution here stands out because of blah, blah, blah.
I haven't read through all the articles that you referenced here, and but I'm a little bit curious about the use as a complement to the webinars. Yeah. And how you facilitated group discussions and group work in connection with that.
Yeah.
Is that something you can? Do you have any insights on that, or?
I found that works really well. Yeah, I found that worked really well. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about really looking into the added value of chatbot technology in education. So yes, during the lockdown, obviously we had to be really clear about our weekly learning. I would write a lesson plan for students and break it down. So it might be in the first 5 minutes, they need to watch a video, then read a case study, then we would have a webinar class, and then they would have a follow-up task where they might have to read something or consider something that we discussed in the webinar, and they would have to use differ. So that after webinar task was differ, and they were instructed what they needed to do, whether it was meeting to discuss with their group members part of an assessment, or whether it was to make a comparison on topics discussed during the session. Again, obviously teacher-led to facilitate that. Whether that's something that would be ongoing, I don't know. Maybe it's just to push that initial interest in introducing that technology. Who knows? I don't know which of those it is, but I know it's had to be quite teacher-led this term. But once the students use the technology, they seem to really engage with it and each other. But they need that little push. But then, could it be given the could this be due to the pandemic and everyone being dispersed? I don't know. We can't concretely say, why it had to be a lead on teacher focus this term, because there are many possibilities. But that's just from my own experience, and that's how I integrated it using different weekly webinars, which I would like to do again this term, because we're starting to teach physically on campus again. So I want to see. So I want to see. I'm teaching prototyping and web design, so I'd like to use it with the students and look at whether we have a similar engagement with different. Now we're physically back on campus, what we had when we were dispersed. And I can see a big use for chatbot technology in distance learning, particularly through correspondence courses like the OU. I don't know if they use a chatbot, but if not, perhaps they should snap one up. I think that would be very beneficial to them.
Yeah. I know they're starting a new project now around what's the name again? Digital practices. Sorry, I forgot about that. But yeah, they are exploring the topic, and I think one research area that they're looking at is chatbots for the purpose of accessibility.
Okay.
To what extent this conversational interface might be beneficial for certain groups with specific accessibility needs. So that's fascinating. Is there any thoughts or questions here? I have one question to all of you. See if there's any questions to Sylvie. Otherwise, I think I just would like to say thank you again, Sylvie, for taking the time to participate here and share your the summary of your all the research you've done here now over a couple of years. So that's fantastic and really valuable to all of us. So I have one question to all of you, and that's about the webinars here. Do you have any good ideas of new speakers? So is there, when you think about chatbots in education, is there any individuals that stick out that comes first to mind that we should bring onto the show here?
Well, I think it's sorry. Yes, Ellie, please.
I was going to say, perhaps you should ask Steve Ellis.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's written lots of blogs and articles on the future of use of chatbots in HE. It might be worth asking Steve.
Okay. Yeah, I'll write him down. Diana, did you have any idea?
Actually, yes. I think it would be very interesting and beneficial for the project that we all share all our project results in webinars. Those presentations that has been presented in the Intern conference and also HCI conference to share all that knowledge, because we didn't hear it all. Not all partners see all the research that has been presented within the project.
That's good. I'm just setting up a program now for the next month or two. So I hope we can make a really interesting program. And Sylvia, I'm unsure if you're aware of the learning experience that we're creating for educators. So we are making a CMOOC that we have published, and making that available to anyone across Europe. So educators that are curious about using chatbots in their teaching and learning practice can join and learn the basics by some learning materials that we put together. But then we hope to encourage everyone to, just like you've done, putting together your own research on the trials and pilots and work with at your institution. Others can share that into the community, this community of practice, so that we create new knowledge together. So that's something that is available both to you and your colleagues at the Regents and at other institutions as well.
Okay, and Lars, I'll be in touch about arranging a meeting, perhaps in a couple of weeks. Would that be okay? I've just been swamped with research. Well, you've seen how busy I've been now.
Yeah, I see that. So I would love that. So let's schedule that. So I think we'll wrap up for today. It was great seeing you all. Thank you for taking the time again. So have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.